really just say I am really thrilled. I'm honored, and I'm a little bit nervous, truthfully, to be with you today with Dale Hansen, a legendary broadcaster, reporter, sports anchor, commentator, guest on Ellen. I mean, you have done it all.
I've done quite a bit. I've done a great deal more than I ever thought I would. I can guarantee you that. I was just a kid in Logan, Iowa, which is about 20 miles outside Omaha. Never went to college. Bounced around for a few years, just doing. I was a bill collector and a food salesman and the like. And all I ever wanted to be was a disc jockey. That was my so-called childhood dream. Who
was the DJ that you admired most listening to?
Well, there was a guy in Omaha, Nebraska named Roger W. Morgan, who I just listened to every day. And then Joe Light did the afternoons. And then as I got older, there was a guy in Chicago that I caught up with. There was a guy named Larry Lujak.
Oh, yeah.
And called himself Super Jock. Remember that? And but I always, even as a kid, I listened to the radio differently than most young people. I didn't listen for the music. I listened to hear what the disc jockeys had to say. And it just never seemed like that was a realistic possibility. So I ended up getting all these different jobs, kind of stumbled my way into broadcasting. And next thing I know, I'm on the Ellen Show and being honored in DC. And
just like that. Yeah. From Larry Lujak wannabe to Ellen and meeting Obama and all those.
Yeah, I met Mr. Obama that day when I was getting this national lifetime achievement award, and I met Mr. Obama that day, and I'll never forget. He said at the end of our little meeting, he said, "Now listen, a little choke in the throat is good, but no bawling up there. No bawling up there." He said, "You don't start bawling, but a little choke in the throat can be very effective." And when I was doing my speech that night, I started to get just a little bit choked up. And I swear to you, Mark, I started laughing to myself because I had that thought running through my head of, well, a little choke is okay, but no bawling. and it actually worked. I mean, it helped me get through the speech. But yeah, I mean, it was amazing. I wanted to be this disc jockey. So after getting fired from all these jobs of bill collector and food salesman and the like, I get a job in Newton, Iowa, at KCOB, Newton, Iowa, $94 a week in January of 1972. And I'm thinking this is the greatest thing in the world. I didn't care about the $94. I was just thrilled. And about 3 months later, I was ready to put a gun in my mouth. I mean, it was the worst job in the world.
Which part of it was bad? What was bad about it?
The worst part of it was this was back in the day when the disc jockeys basically just worked by themselves in the studio.
And you got to play what you wanted to play, right? Isn't that?
Oh, yeah. But it was the same song every day. And I'd say something which I thought was funny. I have no idea if anybody's laughing. I mean, there's nobody listening. I mean, Newton, Iowa, we only have about 12 listeners anyway, probably. But I'm telling you the truth, it was crushing. It was absolutely crushing because here I am living out this, what I thought was an impossible dream, only to find out that I can't do this. I mean, this is so incredibly boring. I'm sitting there, I'm drinking Cokes and smoking cigarettes nonstop, spinning the same records, trying to be funny on the radio and having no idea if anybody's laughing, because this is the difference. I think now it's even better. When almost every major radio show has a co-worker or sidekicks, and so you get that opportunity to play off people. And this is how lucky I've been in my life, though. Seriously, I'm only 3 to 4 months into this job, and I can't stand it. But I also know I can't go anywhere else because I can't work 8 to 5. I mean, I just can't do it. I mean, there's just no way I could ever work 8 to 5. And a guy, I'll never forget it, a guy named Dave Reek was the newscaster at the radio station, and he just up and quit. And John Carl was the general manager and the owner. And he said to me, he said, "I know you hate being a disc jockey. How about being the news reporter?"
Wow.
And I really did. Why not? It was really more of a, what else is there? And it just clicked. I mean, it just absolutely clicked. and I just love doing the news. Then I'm doing the sports.
So wait,
And
was
then
the news? Was it like UPI, the World Desk of United Press
yeah,
International,
a
or
little
was
bit,
it?
but
Were you doing your own news gathering?
oh
Or
no, I was doing my own newscast. But and this was the great thing. As strange as this may sound to you, I've got a little plaque on my wall right over here. It's one of the greatest things I've got. And it said the Iowa Broadcast News Association Investigative Reporter of the Year, 1976.
wow,
And I've kept that forever because two things. I win that statewide award for investigative reporting on a 1,000 watt daytime radio station in a town of 15,000 people. Part of it was I was actually pretty good. And more importantly, Newton, Iowa was like the Peyton Place of America. I mean, you couldn't believe what was going on in Newton, Iowa. And there was this little lady, I called her my bag lady, and she was like a tinfoil hatted person. I swear to you, she was. And she was crazy. Most people thought she was crazy, and she probably was.
okay.
But every so often, she was right. I exposed the Jasper County Nursing Home, which had a section for disabled and mentally challenged and mentally disabled patients as well. They were sexually molesting them. They were sterilizing them without their knowledge and consent. One woman actually walked out of the nursing home, stepped out into the highway, and was run over by a semi. The Jasper County supervisors, which is like the elected officials in charge, they were ripping off the money because they were charging like food prices and then delivering inferior products. We had a county attorney who was soliciting sex to drop charges. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. And a lot of it was, there's been a traffic accident at the intersection of 4th and Jasper Road, But
Well, how did you get the time to to like dive in? I mean, this is kind of like, and pardon the reference, but this is like when Geraldo became a serious reporter, when he did a similar kind of report on a what do you call it? I think they were called asylums back then. And talked about how bad the living conditions were and how bad everybody was treated. And you're breaking this kind of news in Iowa.
I'm breaking it in Iowa. The Des Moines Register picked up several of my stories. In fact, the Jasper County Nursing Home sued me after this all broke, but then they also sued the Des Moines Register, and then they dropped me from the lawsuit because I didn't have any money, and KCOB didn't have any money. And I had left there by then anyway. But I mean, this is true. I
pay them in old 45s or something.
Yeah, like it was like a scene out of Woodward and Bernstein's Great Watergate stuff. I'm actually in a cornfield in Iowa with this little old lady in my car, and I'm flashing my headlights at a car on the other side of this field. And it was the nurse who had all the documents that she provided me, backing up, everything that was happening. And I'm in a cornfield in Iowa late at night, flashing headlights at one another because this woman is so scared. And that kind of stuff was happening on a regular basis. And I had a general manager who, for the most part, he loved the attention we were getting. And it was crazy. And I get this Iowa Investigative Award, which then led to me going to several other stations, only to find out that I wasn't quite the investigative reporter I thought I was when I didn't have the little old bag lady, doing some of the grunt work, And then, and you maybe well know this story, but I was still doing a pretty good job. I mean, I was going from station to station, getting fired all the time, but that's kind of part of the business.
That's lesson 2. Lesson 1 is listen to the bag lady with the aluminum foil hat.
Always.
Any reporter who doesn't listen to these people or listen to, who writes off possible sources because they may be different. That's where you get great news.
It's the only place you get great news. I mean, I've always used this line. The president of the Chamber of Commerce never calls you to tell you how crooked the city is.
Yeah, true.
You go to a criminal trial. The witnesses against the defendant are never the school board president and the Chamber of Commerce president. It's some other sleazy guy who's doing a deal on the side. Now, then my job and our job in this business was, well, is she telling the truth or not? And there was I was competing against the daily newspaper in Newton, Iowa. And in all seriousness, they just disregarded this woman. I mean, they did. And I understand why, because she was goofy. I mean, she was really crazy. And she would come to me with some of the most outlandish stories you can imagine. But if I couldn't prove them, I just moved on. She moved on. And then every so often, oh, here's what the county attorney's doing. And I don't know how she found this stuff out, but she went to every city council meeting. She knew everybody in town. She talked to everybody. And she, in all seriousness, had the ability to cultivate those sources that, you know, for the most part, I probably never did or never would have. But I did have the ability, because of the general manager at the station who allowed me to do it, to report these stories on a local radio station, which then led to me getting hired at all these other jobs. But here's the kicker to this whole long story. I'm actually doing pretty good. Nothing great, but I'm kind of recognized for being, as I found out, when I walked in the door of a TV station, I got fired from my latest radio job. Mm-hmm. We all got fired at Coyle in Omaha.
Well, that's the second lesson for any young people who maybe, you know, you're not anybody until you get fired in this business.
Well, not in television and radio. I don't think you are. I mean, if you look, almost everybody who's anybody's been fired a few times along the way. Right. I was listening to Jimmy Kimmel, just for example. He was doing radio for years. He got fired. He's at about every station in town. But you just keep going. I mean, and that's the other thing. I had this weird makeup, I guess. My mom and dad moved from 221 West 4th Street to 223 West 4th Street in their whole life, right? My dad had one job. He owned his own little trucking company. That was it. He never could understand how I could go from city to city to city, job after job after job. And for the most part, I loved it. I mean, I loved it. I started having this dream as I got into the business that, okay, I can move up here a little bit. I mean, I don't mean this to be as arrogant as it's probably going to sound, but I never thought I'd end up doing what I did. But I did have this dream that I would always be in a major market, you know, like a top 10, covering, you know, big time stuff. But when I walked in the door, I got fired at Coyle. I walked in the door at KMTV in Omaha, Nebraska, just on a lark. Never been on TV in my life. And the guy had heard of me on the radio. And his other reporters had said, you really got to keep an eye on this guy. When he goes to a school board meeting, he grills these people, right, with his questions. So he says to me, and I promise you this is true, he says to me, where'd you go to school? I said, Logan, Iowa. He said, no, I mean, where'd you go to college? Where'd you get your formal education? I said, well, I never went to college. He goes, oh my God. He said, you can't be a reporter here. I mean, every reporter has to have a journalism degree. We don't hire anybody without a college degree. I said, oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that. This is where this angel lands on my shoulder. The phone rings, and it's the weekend sportscaster, a guy named Dave Weber. And he quit, just out of the blue. He decides to quit and go to Idaho or something. And Mark Gutierrez was the news director, and he slams the phone down, and he looks at me, and he said, hey, kid, do you like sports? Hell, I love sports. I mean, I'm looking for a job. I mean, all I really want is a job in broadcasting. He said, how would you like to be the weekend sportscaster?
Wait, this is when you walked into this place. This is going on as you walk into this place, and he's telling you didn't go to college. You can't do this. Oh, by the way, the guy just quit. You're hired.
How would you like to do sports? All in one meeting. I promise you, all in one meeting. So I said, well, I love sports. And he goes, I said, but I swear, I said, I thought you said, though, that everybody who works here has to have a college degree. And he goes, no, not to be a sportscaster. You don't need any education at all. I swear to you, I did. So he said, Saturday morning, we're going to have an audition. And there were 11 of us. And I can remember this like it was yesterday. Now, again, I had no idea how television worked. I'd never been on TV, never seen it. I walk in Saturday morning at 10 o'clock for the audition, and there were 11 of us there. And Mark Gatier walks in and he goes, "Gentlemen, there will be no teleprompter used for the audition." And 10 guys went, "Oh, God." And I turned to this guy and I go, what's a teleprompter? Because I had no idea. But I knew you always managed to maintain eye contact. So I just assumed that you memorized your scripts. And I had the ability back then when I was younger, especially. I write a script because I always wrote in very conversational style. That's made it easier. So if I lost my place, I wasn't in a big problem because I was kind of just talking anyway. So they said, "I'll give you 30 minutes to write a 4-minute sportscast." I went upstairs, I banged out this 4-minute sportscast, and I basically memorized it. We walked downstairs, and Mark was just like this. 10 guys are going, Nebraska football coach Tom Osborne said today that boom, boom, boom. And I walked down and went, Nebraska football coach Tom Osborne said today that I am hip. His star running back's got a bad hamstring and he won't play. Yeah, another sports field. And I just nailed it. Now, here's the part you won't believe. I was about, let's see, I would have been like 29 years old. And I had this long, thick black hair. And I was working in rock and roll radio. I had sideburns down to about here. Had all my hair kind of permed up and brushed out. And I just threw it over my collar and shoulders, real long.
It was the 70s.
It was the 70s. I looked like hell, but it was the 70s. So a week goes by and I call him. I said, "Have you made any decision?" He said, "No, we're still looking." And I was at that time being hired in Galveston, Texas at a radio station. And I'd call him up. I said, "Listen, I can't make it this week. My car broke down." So then I called Mark Gatier and he said, "Give us a week." I called him back. This went on for a month. When I called Galveston one time, I think I said, my grandmother just died. And it'll be another week before I can get there. And he said, "Well, I think this is the third grandmother you've killed off this month." Delay. So finally, and I swear this out, it's like a light bulb went off. And I called my dad because I was flat broke. I called my dad, got a couple $100, walked into Landon's, never forget it, bought this really nice looking blue suit, white shirt, red tie, walked into the gal who cut my hair, cut my rock and roll hair. And I said, "Cut it off." And I looked like I stepped out of a Brooks Brothers ad. And I called Mark Gatier and I said, "Can I see you? I've got to go to Galveston tomorrow." And I said, "But can I come talk to you before I go?" He said, "Sure." I walked in. He goes, "Hold on a second." He walked downstairs. He came back and he handed me a contract. Oh. And I goes, "So you didn't like the hair?" And he goes, "Oh, God." He said, I said, "Why didn't you just tell me to cut it? I'd have cut the hair." He goes, "Well, we figured you look like a guy that might sue us if we did." He said, "If you'd have cut the hair, we'd have hired you last month." So they hired me, and about 6 months later, they moved me up, and I replaced a guy that had been there like 11 years. And I became the sports director. Then I eventually got fired, and I came to Dallas.
For what you get fired for? What was it? It was
just a fight with a producer. They accused me of beating him up, but I didn't, obviously. But it was a big fight with this producer who was really this bully of a kid. He would call the women reporters the worst names imaginable. So he screwed up my sportscast one night, and I just went off. And I'm yelling at him like, I never denied that. I mean, I'm a big man. I'm about 6'4". At that time, I was about 210. But I'm 6'4", 210. I'm just standing there like, call me what you called her. Say to me what you said to that young woman, right? Now, he was scared. I'm not denying that, which was kind of the point.
All right.
But I never laid a hand on him. But anyway, they fired me. I ended up getting hired in Dallas at the CBS affiliate. Lasted about 2.5 years there and got fired again. And this is the other kind of little kicker this way. The guy who fired me in Omaha was the same guy who fired me in Dallas.
Oh, really? Oh, so you got, yeah. Something he says to this day, I fired that guy twice.
Twice. He did. He fired me in Omaha. And again, another true story. I sent him a telegram because about a year later, he got fired in Omaha. So I sent him a telegram. Now I'm working in Dallas. And I said, "Hey, Bill, I work in Dallas, Texas. How about you?" And probably kind of a stupid thing to do because about a year and a half later, they hired Bill Wilson at Channel 4. And I go into Bill Wilson's office. He said, "Hey, Dale, I work in Dallas, Texas. How about you?"
Where do you
And fired me again. Now,
good
that
thing he
one was
doesn't have a long
basically
memory or anything. Yeah.
no. It was kind of funny because when they hired him, there was a guy named John McKay was the general manager, and I just went nuts when I heard they'd hired Bill Wilson because I knew I was on my way out.
That's it. Yeah.
And John McKay called me in. He goes, "I told Bill Wilson, you're the guy. You're going to be a star. That whole telegram thing, albeit stupid, Dale, but that whole telegram thing, he's long forgotten about that. Don't worry about it." And the first thing he said to me was, after, "Hey, I work in Dallas. How about you?" I said, "Oh, you remember the telegram?" And Bill Wilson looks at me. He goes, "Stupid thing to do." And I swear to you, I looked right at him. I said, "I told John McKay that'd be the first thing you brought up. And sure enough, you did. So let's go down the hall and tell John what you just said to me." And about 3 months later, luckily, I got a job offer in Los Angeles, and I was going to leave. And John McKay said, "We can't pay you, LA money, obviously. But he said, you love it here," which I do. I never wanted to leave. I turned down ESPN. I turned down Los Angeles.
Well, I was going to ask you that, but
Yeah.
finish the story. Yeah.
I just thought, but anyway, to finish the story. So I go back and they said, "If you'll stay, we're going to give you some new jobs, new shows, and we'll give you a big bump in rate." Not in LA money, obviously, but I said, "That's fine. I'll stay." So I turned down LA in November of 1982. In January of 83, they come to me and they say, "We'd like you to do this show. We're going to add that show, whatever, specials for that." I said, "That's great. No problem." I worked all the time, believe it or not. When I was younger, I worked all the time. And I said, "What does that pay?" They go, "Well, we'll talk about salary later." I said, "Well, no, let's talk about salary today."
It seems like a good place to talk about salary right now.
And he goes, "Well," and I swear, he goes, "Well, we want to start the shows next week." And I said, "Well, I'd like to start a new contract next week." And he goes, "I said, we'll talk about salary later." And I said, "Okay, well, then we'll talk about doing the new shows later." And this is the kind of guy, and so he finally looks at me and he said, "We're starting the shows Monday." And I looked right at him. I said, "Well, I promise you this, John, if I don't have a new contract by Monday, when Clarice Tinsley, who was the co-anchor, when she turns to her left to talk to the sports guy, she's going to be talking to an empty chair. Because I'm not doing the shows until I get paid." And then about a month and a half later, they fired me. And I walked across the street to Channel 8 that same week. I got fired on a Monday, shot promos on Friday, and I was back on the air the following Monday. And then I was there for 38 and a half years. And
wow.
And got about a $30,000 raise. Yeah. And got about a $30,000 raise to go to Channel 8,
Oh.
So and then after that, that's when ESPN called, and I just said no.
Did you ever have an
Channel 8,
agent, or these were all things that you made happen yourself?
They were all what again?
Things you made happen yourself, or did you have an agent? Or
No. I never had an agent. What's the big Philip, the Morris Agency or something like that?
William Morris.
William Morris. They called me.
Now.
Yeah, they called me, and this is kind of weird. This is how stupid I am on the one hand, I guess. But they called me at Channel 4. This is before I got fired. And they said, "Hey, you're kind of the hot young guy, getting a lot of buzz, whatever. We'd like you to sign up." I said, "I'd love to." And they said, "Yeah, we take like 15%. I said, "Well, that's fine. You get me a big job, I'll give you 15%. And they said, "Well, no, we take 15% now." I said, "Well, why would I give you 15% of the check that I've already got?" And I said, "On the hope that you get." I said, "No." I said, "I'm not going to do that." And I didn't. So I hired a lawyer a couple of times during the contracts.
Yeah.
But even then I ended up firing the lawyer most times because I think the one thing that finally clicked for whatever reason at Channel 8 that just didn't at other stations. I never ever had a contract fight, if you will, at Channel 8 in 38 and a half years. And in my world, I made a lot of money. But I knew what the job paid. I knew what the job was worth. And that's all I ever wanted. And I would sign a contract. And one time I had the woman in the financial office actually came to me, very good friend. And she said, "Dale, you left a lot of money on the table. You could have gotten a lot more. I said, really? I said, so they're happy. Said, oh, my God, Dale, they're thrilled. I went, great, because I know I'm happy.
Right.
And then when I did screw up, or when I did do something stupid, or I called in sick at the last moment because I really wasn't, but I just didn't want to come to work or whatever, I think they just looked the other way, because I was working, again, at a good salary, but I probably should have made a lot more. And I never pushed for more. And I think that's a mistake that almost everybody makes in every aspect of life. I actually, it's like the bank robber. The guy robs the bank, makes a lot of money, but he's never satisfied. So he robs another bank, and he keeps robbing banks until he eventually gets caught. Why did he just stop? You know, guys getting bribed, whether it's a congressman or a Supreme Court justice, just as an example. Why don't they just stop?
Hypothetically, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hypothetically.
Hypothetical,
I mean, ever,
Supreme Court guy who has his buddy pay property.
Why do they just keep going for more until they get caught? And it happens all the time. And I think it was one of the reasons that I finally was able to last as long as I did in Dallas, is I was very happy with the money I made. But I don't think you'll find a general manager in the last 38 years of my life who would say he screwed us on the paycheck. He just didn't. And I never worked for the paycheck. I was making 50,000.
But you also had the cojones to not start the other job or at the previous station, at the CBS station, without a new contract.
Right.
I mean, that's
I'll give you
pretty gutsy.
I'll give you two quick. Yeah. Well, and people tell me I'm crazy and weird, but I believe this. When I was in Newton, Iowa, that first job, I started, like I said, at $94 a week. About 3 years later, they offered me $16,000 a year. This was 1975. A country club membership, and a car, a free car, and a free gas card. Now that seemed to me like a gold mine, right? I've never heard of such a thing. I'm trying to think, how am I going to possibly spend $16,000 a year? I mean, that's like $1,000 every month, right? I mean, I can't do it. So I accept the deal, and I turned down this other station that had offered me $12,000 and a country club membership, no car, but a gas card. So I go in to sign the deal to stay at KCOB in Newton, Iowa. And I probably would have stayed there the rest of my life, quite honestly, because that guy ended up buying like 30 radio stations, and I was going to be his main guy managing all of them. And I probably would have made a gazillion dollars and may or may not have been happy in Iowa, but still. I go in to sign the contract, and he says, we're going to make it $15,000 with a $1,000 bonus at the end of the year. Mm-hmm. And he said, it'll be easy to make. I said, well, then give it to me now. He said, no, I want to do 15 plus 1. I said, well, I want to do 16. I said, our deal was 16. I said, I'm not going to do it. He said, well, then what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go take the job in Knoxville, Iowa. He said, yeah, but they're only paying you 12. And I'll promise you, Mark, I looked right at him. I said, yeah, but they didn't change their offer.
All right.
And I went to Knoxville, Iowa for 12, turning down 15 because the guy changed his contract. You flash forward about 20 years. I'm at Channel 4. The guy says to me, we'll pay you. I said, no, you pay me. I signed the contract. I'll live up to it. You then go forward about 5 more years. Fox offered me a ridiculous amount of money to move to Los Angeles in about, I don't know, 86, 87, 88, something like that. Offered me a ridiculous amount of money, and the station wouldn't let me go. I said, that's fine. I signed the contract. And they said, well, we can't pay you Fox LA money. I said, you don't have to pay me Fox LA money. You don't have to pay me anything. I'm under contract for like 3 more years. And Marty Haig, the news director, looks over at Ward Hewitt. He goes, I told you, he's crazy. But if I put my name to it, we're done. There was a guy, Gifford Nielsen, working in Houston. And Houston was, I worked for this Belo Corporation. They had like 8 or 9 radio stations or TV stations. And Gifford Nielsen was a sportscaster, former Houston Oilers quarterback, became a sportscaster in Houston. So he calls me and he said, hey, Dale, you're the big guy in Belo. You're the top dog in Belo. I'm up for a new contract. Would you mind if we just compared numbers so I can kind of see what I can get? I said, yeah, I'll help you. Now, he's like the number 4 guy in a 3-station market. And he looks at me and said, yeah, I said, they're offering me $250,000. Wow, I'm making 160. He said, I said, do you do Sunday nights? Because I was doing it 6 days a week plus Sunday nights. He said, no, I do 5 days a week. I said, how much vacation time do you have? He said, well, I get 5 weeks. I was getting 3. And I'd been there like 4 more years. I said, well, Giff, I said, I don't think I'm going to be able to help you.
I'm not.
I said, I don't think I'm going to be able to help you. So
You may be helping me at this point.
Yeah. But I kind of start spreading the word that I know about Gifford Nielsen's contract. Dave Lane, the greatest human being / general manager I've ever worked for in my life. He calls me in. Now I'm making $160,000. And he says, I know that you know about Gifford's contract, so I want to make it right with you. I said, that's fine. I said, you don't have to. I mean, I'm under contract for like 2 more years. He said, no, we're going to change it. He said, we're going to give you 175, 185, 195. I went, why would I do that? Hey, well, because you're making 160. And I'm going to raise it to 175. And then the next 2 years, I'll make it 185 and 195. I said, Dave, you're already offering Gifford Nielsen 2.25 or 250. He said, what do you want? I said, I want 375. He said, you're making 160. Get out of my office. Get out of my office. So I laughed. I said, well, I'm not doing that. I mean, why would I do that? So Marty Haight calls me at home. He goes, you're not going to say a word. I said, not for 2 more years. I said, I promise you. And I would have. I promise you. I would have gone to work every day. I would have never said a word. I signed that contract. Now, this sounds old-fashioned to a lot of people.
Right.
But I signed that contract. I'll honor that contract. But if I have to work 2 more years for like 160,000 while you're paying Gifford Nielsen 250, if you want me to stay in 2 more years, you're going to have to pay me a lot. And I ended up getting the deal I wanted. And Dave Lane helped me buy my little mini ranch outside of Dallas. And I've been living in the country ever since. And
did you name it after him or anything? Did you?
Yeah, I should have, but I remember when my dad saw one of my contracts, my tax return rather. It was in my better years, let's say.
Yeah.
And my old man sees my tax returns laying on the kitchen table, and he almost comes in, kind of like Trump would say. He almost had like tears in his eyes. He was like tears in his eyes. But he does, because he never cried in his life. But he comes and he goes, is that tax form right? Is that tax form? I said, well, hell, it better be. I paid a lot of money to get it. My God, I never made $40,000. I said, well, you don't talk about the Cowboys for a living, Dad. That's how stupid this world is right now. And I think it was he never said I'm proud of you. He was not that kind of a guy. But I do think it was the one time I found out after he died that he was supposedly pretty proud of what I had done.
Oh.
He never said it to me. Never complimented me. He was just like, this is stupid. This is just stupid. I mean, my God, I can't believe they pay you that kind of money. And I can't believe it either. But I think that's one of the reasons that I was able to stay. And I love staying. I have no regrets about it. I didn't want to be. See, I don't care if Philadelphia beats Cleveland tonight. I don't care if Boston beats Atlanta. I like knowing the people that I'm covering and being involved with. I love the Cowboys. I love the Mavericks. I love the Rangers. But what I really liked is seeing Steve Buechele play third, Charlie Huff pitch, Troy Aikman, Emmett Smith, Michael Irvin, whatever. I'm not that kind of a sports guy. I didn't have any great fascination with the World Series, for example. I mean, except when the Rangers played there for a couple of years. I thought it was one of the greatest events I've ever been to in my life. But I didn't care. If the Yankees were playing the Dodgers, I mean, I'd probably watch, but I didn't really care. And so when ESPN called, and this was funny, the guy said, we're going to make you, this is 1983. He said, we're going to make you the Brent Musburger of ESPN, which in those days was a hell of a compliment.
Right. Yeah.
But
did that go to Bourbon eventually? Was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in 1983, ESPN was primarily, woodchuck contest and
Right.
log rollings. And he said, we're going to
Arm
get
wrestling.
baseball, football, arm wrestling. And I said, I'm not. And what was so weird about it, one, I had an obligation to Channel 8 because they took me off the street. Two, I had no desire to talk national sports. And three, I don't want to go up there and cover the lumberjack contest in Idaho. But it was so funny. My 12-year-old son was like, "You turned down ESPN? How stupid are you?" And he reminded me of that for years and years.
Well, did you tell him you'd have to go to school in Bristol, Connecticut?
Yeah, you're going to live in Connecticut, for goodness sake. But I would have never been a Chris Berman or a Keith Olbermann. When I turned down Los Angeles, the station that I turned down in LA hired Keith Olbermann.
Oh.
But I would have never been Keith Olbermann. I'm not that smart. I would have never been Chris Berman. I'm not that passionate about any of that stuff. I just
what
fell
was
in
it
love.
about you? What was it that what made you click so much at WFAA? You are as much of a part of the fabric of Dallas-Fort Worth and this country. We're going to get to your commentaries later.
Yeah.
But you are sewn into the fabric of sports life and people who grew up watching news in Dallas-Fort Worth.
Yeah.
What was the connection?
Yeah. Well, I think part of the connection in the beginning, I think the connection was I just had a ridiculous passion for it. I just loved Dallas-Fort Worth. I love the Dallas Cowboys. I think I brought an enthusiasm to the set every night that everybody knew was not fake. Because if I didn't feel well, you'd know that too. If I was angry about something, I never played sportscaster. I just played me. Now they didn't like it in Omaha. Apparently they didn't like it very much, although the ratings were really good at Channel 4 in Dallas. But in Omaha, I really was. I was like the third-rated sportscaster in a 3-station market. Nobody ever. People are still shocked in Omaha that I lasted in Dallas the way I did. But I just played me, and I want even today. You see so many sportscasters, especially sportscasters, trying to play a role. Boom, there goes the. Oh, shut up. Who says that? The Mavericks were soundly thrashed at the hands of the Boston. I've never said that, So when I started, I got criticized for this a lot, but I would say, like covering Creighton basketball, I went, Creighton got beat tonight. And I got so many letters from English teachers. I was like the Dizzy Dean of Omaha getting all this hate mail. And Mark Gutierrez walks in, he goes, "You really can't say got beat." I said, well, wait a minute. You walk into a bar, you haven't seen the game, but these other 20 people sitting there have. You walk up to them and say, hey, how'd Creighton do tonight? And 13 of them would turn around and say, they got beat. And then the other 7 might say they lost. None of them would say they were humiliated and soundly thrashed at the hands of the DePaul, Chicago, But everybody else seems to do it a lot. They write like George Will, for goodness sakes. I like reading George Will's columns, and I get madder than hell when I got to stop and pull out a dictionary to see what the hell that means. Right. I write for one of my favorite compliments ever was I did sports like the guy sitting on the bar stool arguing with the guy next to it. And that I think that's the way I did it. And I think people related to it in Dallas. Now, why they did, I'm not real sure why it clicked. But prior to me, Vern Lundquist was here. And you talk about legends.
Yeah, he did 6 and you did 11. Is that or 10?
10, yeah. And he had been on for like 15 years prior to that, doing the 6 and 10, and very straight. Very straight. But he's Vern Lundquist, for goodness sakes. He had that great voice. He had this ability to deliver just phrases that just, wow, how do you do that? He never wrote a script. He put on a piece of paper. So he had like a piece of paper. Cowboys, Rangers, Mavericks, boom. That's it. And he just go. But it was very straight. Ball scores. He had Bud Fitopoulos doing his highlights out of Chicago, for the Cubs game or some nonsense. And I came in and did it myself. And Iola Johnson, the line, she was the main co-anchor at the station. And Iola Johnson had this line about me. She said, when Dale came in, she goes, I had to move my chair because he gets to rocking and bouncing around so much doing his highlights. I'm afraid he's going to hit me. But I just loved it. So I'm doing like, oh, man, look at this. This is great. Boom. Whereas, Vern and Jim Brinson and Scott Murray and everybody else just, here's the Mavericks game. It was an embarrassing defeat tonight. Whoever says embarrassing defeat? Wouldn't that ever come up in conversation? But they saw in some school that, that sounds clever. That sounds like I'm really good at this, And I just said, no, the Mavericks
the way
played
it's supposed to be. That's the way it's supposed to sound. That's what I'm doing. I tell all young kids who are learning to write, I'm like, just talk.
Just talk.
Just talk. Yeah. Don't write it like you think it's supposed to sound.
Right. I talk out loud when I write, I always talk out loud. So the co-anchors at Channel 8 used to always laugh that they said, we knew your sportscast before you ever did it because you're sitting at your computer in that little area we had. And I'm talking to the computer. I write it, then I always step back and I'd read it. And I go, no, that doesn't sound right. I wouldn't say that. And I might go back and tweak something or change it. Now, the commentaries, I did a little bit more of trying to be, a little bit better than say, I hate that guy. I love that guy. But still, the thing was the same. The commentaries were just an extension of what I did on a typical sportscast. I'm just telling you what I feel. I'm telling you what I believe. And I really, surprisingly, one of the things that worked is I was critical of the Dallas Cowboys in the early 80s when they started losing, which nobody ever did. Nobody ever did.
All right.
And that actually resonated with some. Now, not everybody liked that, of course, but it tended to resonate with a lot of people. And I don't know. I know why. I know why my commentaries worked. I don't know why my sportscast worked. I swear to you, to this day, I really don't. Other than this is the way I did it. This is what I believe, but I don't know that's a hard, accurate answer.
You have a cadence when your delivery, and it's spoken, but it's almost like poetry. How did that come about?
Actually, it was from a consultant in Omaha, Nebraska. You familiar with Paul Harvey?
Yeah.
Do you remember Paul Harvey at all?
Yes.
Great delivery.
What was his last line? That's the one.
What was it? Paul Harvey.
Good day.
Good day.
Good day. Yeah.
Good day. Paul Harvey. Good day. But
the rest of the story. That's
it. That one. And that's the rest of the story. Yeah. But I love listening. I hated his politics, obviously, but I love listening to Paul Harvey. But anyway, I'm in Omaha, Nebraska. And now, one of the very first things I learned about doing sports is you talk fast. That conveys enthusiasm. Well, I didn't do it. So I talked really fast. But I never paused. And we had this woman come in as a consultant. And here's another thing I did that most people don't. Everybody walks in and they go, if you could do it, you do it. I'm not listening to you. I'm a big star anchor. I don't need to listen to some consultant.
I was like a sponge. Once or twice with a consultant. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yes. But no, I'm like a sponge. I said, I don't think you can teach me everything, but I sure as hell hope you can teach me something. And I went into every consultant meeting. I used to go to all these seminars around the Midwest when I was starting out. And I'd pay like $25. And I would sit in every one of those sessions. 80% of it was nonsense. Oh, there's a nugget. I can use that. So I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, and this woman says to me, she goes, "You're really good. You got a good voice. I was thinner back then. I look better. All that nonsense." And she said, "And you're very clever, and you're funny, but you talk so fast you don't let the viewer catch up. So you drop a funny line, and then you keep right on going." And she said, you need to be like that stand-up comedian. So they always drop the bomb and then they just kind of stop. Uh-huh. Now you can't do it like you're in an audience because but that's where it all started. I mean, it really. So I said, well, yeah. So I get this cadence down, And it is kind of, well, I don't know actually which came first, but it's pretty much the way I talk to my wife and kids. I kind of boom, boom. Everybody, oh, gee,
Oh,
you
there he
sound
is
just
with
like
that voice again. There he is.
yeah. But I mean, I'm always intrigued. You always say, well, you sound just like you do on TV. But I do think there's something to that. If I'm having drinks in a bar with you and we're sitting there talking, I'm going to sound almost exactly like I would sound if you were watching me on TV. And I think that's kind of the key, that I didn't put on some persona for TV. I think a lot of people thought I did, but that cadence was more to let people catch up with the thought. So if I say something funny, if I say something that's got a little zing to it, then I would just have that cadence that allows people to absorb it before I move on. And I tell the truth, I think that's when it really started to click. That I learned that right at the tail end of Omaha, Nebraska, parlayed it into Dallas, and I clicked pretty well and pretty quickly at Channel 4 in Dallas, Texas. When I came to Channel 4, in the 16 years that Vern Lundquist was dominating the local airwaves, Channel 4 had 44 sportscasters. 44. And they would give them like 6 months. Oh, you didn't beat Vern, you're out. Oh, and Mark, I promise you this is true also. I'm sitting there unemployed, desperately needing a job. And the guy looks at me and they put in a tape of Vern doing his sportscast. And they said, can you do this? And I swear to you, I looked at him, I go, I could, but I won't. And they're like, what? I mean, he's the standard. He's the model. And I think Vern always had a bit of a problem with me because of that.
All right.
Everybody tried to copy him. Well, why would you watch Vern Light if you can get the real deal on Channel 8? So I came on and I did funny stories. I did live shots from bars. I did high school sports, the first one in Dallas to cover it on television.
Friday Night crazy Lights. You did Friday Night Lights kind of thing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I started high school football in Texas on local television. I'm talking about.
That's
high school football was here, right?
Yeah, that's oh my God.
Yeah, but there was no high school. There was no high school TV coverage. In fact, I was ridiculed for it by a lot of people. And this is how crazy it was. I told the guy, a guy named Bob Henry was a news director. I said, I want to cover Friday night football. He goes, no, we're a major league city. We're the Cowboys, the Rangers, the Mavericks. We don't mess around with high school. I said, well, I think this will work because number one, high school football in Texas is incredible.
Right.
Number two, if you stick a camera on the kid, well, the kid's going to watch. Mom and dad are going to watch. Grandma and grandpa are going to watch. And then it's up to you once you get them in the tent to make sure they come back. So he said, all right, you can go out. We'll try it Friday night and see how it works. So we went out. We covered 4 games. 1980, fall of 1980. We covered 4 games. The phones went nuts. So Bob Henry, the news director, walks in. He goes, that's so good on Monday morning. I want you to cover all the games. I said, well, Mark, there's like 125.
Yeah, be careful what you ask for, right?
Yeah, and he goes, well, just cover the Dallas games. I said, well, number one, that's about 15 or 20. But I said, you really want to tell Highland Park and Plano and Arlington and Fort Worth? And I list all the cities. I said, you just want to tell them we're not interested? He goes, okay, you're right. We can't cover all the games. Just give all the scores. I said, Mark, Bob, we're back to 150 again. He said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, here's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to cover 4 games every week. We're going to do feature stories on Tuesday. And then we're going to try to tell people, send me a card as to why I should come cover your game.
Oh.
And within a matter of 3 weeks, we had boxes of postcards. And I said, in 25 words or less, on a postcard, tell me why I should come cover your game. And we had boxes begging us to come cover their games. And it just exploded. It just absolutely exploded. And that's where I really made my first mark in Dallas. And then it's up to me to back it up. And I think, for the most part, I was able to do that with some other stuff.
Did they chop her in?
I still covered,
Did they chop her in to each of these games with the, the branded chopper? Or because
I did get choppered around a few times though. That was actually pretty cool. But no, we didn't chopper into the games necessarily. But,
I worked in Corpus. My first job was in Corpus Christi.
Wow, yeah.
And you would start at something because by the time every Friday night that's when they would splurge on the chopper because if it was a news story they weren't going for it. But the Friday night
after football, this. Oh, they do it now, yeah. And they started it back then. Now, I wasn't out covering those games. I'd send out different cameras, but we had guys, choppering in highlights, and choppering from one game to the next. We'd shoot a quarter of that game and then shoot a quarter of the next game.
Yeah.
Now we have, and I think all the stations do, everybody in town has like a half-hour show on the weekends devoted to high school sports. Every station in town covers Friday night football. Many of the games are on television every week. I'll bet there's 4, 5, 6 games on television on all the different cables every week. None of that was there back in 1980, and I get a little defensive about it because I'm like, hey guys, I started that.
Yeah, who has 2 thumbs and started covering Friday night football?
But there was a team at LD Bell in 1982. They were just a great football team. And that was one of the teams I first got really identified with. They invited me back. They had like a 40-year anniversary of their championship team. And they invited me back to be there. And the other town, Haltom, celebrated like their 30th anniversary a couple of years back. And they invited me to go to the banquet and speak at their banquet. So I made these connections. It's so funny. I interviewed and met and covered these kids when they were like 17, 18 years old. Now they're fat and bald and 60. I'm like, what happened here? What happened? I mean, you all look like me now. You all look like me. You're killing me. You're killing me. But I think there again, your original question, I think I just had this connection, and I made that connection with the people, with the guy down the street. And I didn't talk in colorful phrases and nonsense that made me sound like I was something I wasn't. I legitimately loved the highlights. And like Iola Johnson was right. I would just get the bouncing when I'm doing the highlights. I just loved it. And I think people realize that. And it worked. It worked for 41 years in Dallas.
Yeah. There's an article recently in Sports Illustrated about the end of the local sportscaster.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah, no more Dale Hansens, no more George Michaels or Warner Wolfs or
yeah. Well, they've been writing that article for about 20 years. I mean, I think that's like the fourth. I mean, but I think it's a valid point. I mean, when I started, for example, they were talking about Fred Rogan in L.A., which is kind of a standard bearer. There was another guy I used to watch all the time and try to steal from, was the guy named Ted Leitner in San Diego, which is brilliant. Glenn Brenner in DC.
Glenn Brenner was amazing. Yeah.
Oh, I thought he was fabulous. I was on with him. We would always do these goofy little bets on the Washington Cowboys game, and I'd bet Texas barbecue against whatever, and I don't think either one of us ever paid off, but it's still. But I just thought he was brilliant. And I was flat all of a sudden on my butt. How the hell did I get in there? I mean, I promise you, Mark, I don't see that. I don't get it. I'm incredibly flattered, and I'm honored that they bring my name up. But they did this several years ago. It was like the same article in Broadcast Magazine, and the guy wrote this line, and the news director threw it on my desk. He goes, "How much did that cost you?" And the line was like, "Well, unless you have Fred Rogan or Dale Hansen or Ted Leitner, you don't really need to be doing local sports." And that was 15, 20 years ago. And I'm like, well, number one, that didn't make a lot of sense. Number two, I'm in the same sentence with Ted Leitner, Fred Rogan, and Glenn Brenner. I mean, really? But the premise is valid, what they wrote in the recent Sports Illustrated. There are some stations that have eliminated their sports. And I think every station in America has cut back drastically. I used to do 4:45 at 10 o'clock. By the time I left, it was down to 3 minutes, which is a pretty substantial amount of time.
Yeah, no, that's
Uh,
yeah. Now you're down to scores and a couple highlights, right? Yeah.
and if I ever, as I always said, if it rained in Weatherford, I might not get on, because once it started to rain, weather runs all of local news now. And if it started raining in Weatherford, I'm the first thing cut. If the newscast was running long, they cut sports.
Yeah.
We used to have screaming matches about it in the newsroom. I said, I honestly don't care how much time you give me. I mean, I really don't. I'll do a minute and a half, but I want my minute and a half, because I always wrote, at least I tried to. I mean, one story led to the next. One line fed into the next. You know, I didn't just have like 5 stories and staple them together. I always tried to write that song, if you will, that it just kind of flowed from one
You
point
told
to
the
the
story.
next.
You told the story, and in your commentaries, and we were
And
talking
the commentary, right.
and
And I can't just pull out page 3.
you had
I just can't.
callbacks. You would have
Right.
callbacks.
Oh, well, I am as a guy said about me, and it's true. I'm basically a frustrated stand-up comic in a fat sportscaster's body. Greg Aiello said that about me one time. I died laughing. He called to apologize. I said, apologize? I said, that's the greatest line I've ever heard. But
putting it on my wall.
I study stand-up comedy, and that's why I use the callback. I just love the callback. And almost every commentary I wrote, I always had that in mind. Okay, I'm going to start here, but I'm going to come back around. And I just think it's incredibly powerful when it works, when you do it right.
Yeah.
Again, it might be on a more serious topic, but there's a reason that every good comedian uses the power of callbacks. And there's a reporter at Channel 8 now, and I hired him for just that reason. I'm looking at his audition tape, and he got about halfway through this unbelievable story. And I stood up, and I'm sitting with Sean Hamilton, the sports director, and I said, if he says this, he's hired. And he said it. And I called him on the spot. I said, you're hired. He comes in. I said, you understand callback? He goes, I got it from you. I watched he's a very young guy. He said, I watched all your tapes and all your commentaries, and I realized you do it. And I just laughed. So every time I would write a commentary or he would do something like that, I'd always just say, no, callback. I just love the concept. I just love it. But I basically stole it from stand-up comics. I used to spend all my nights at the place called the Comedy Corner on Park Lane and Central. And I knew Bill Engvall when he was the MC for the night.
Really? Wow.
And he was being paid $2 a night and all he could drink, which brought his total to like $800 a night. I mean, he was slamming it back in the day. But I mean, I was in there one night at the Comedy Corner. We go in to see Joe Piscopo. And he was horrible. I mean, horrible. Any stand-up comic that starts off with, let me just tell you, I'm not very good at this. Believe them when they tell you.
They tell you that, yeah.
But get this, Mark. He then says, but I brought a guy with me. He said, you don't know him. We just signed him to be on Saturday Night Live. He's going to be a star someday. And I sat there for 2.5 hours watching a young 18-year-old kid named Eddie Murphy.
Oh, really?
At the Comedy Corner in Dallas.
Wow.
And I did the same thing. So I would go to all the comedy clubs. I mean, I just love stand-up comedy. And when Bob Saget would come to town, I knew Bob very well. And Bob would call me. We'd go have lunch, and I'd give him all these stories about what's happening in Dallas. Then I'd go see his show, and he'd turn it into comedic gold.
All right.
And I would go up and talk to him after the show. And I said, I'm stealing that line for the banquet circuit. I said, I gave you that line. He goes, no, you gave me the idea. You didn't give me the line. You know?
It's like that scene from Mad Men. You gave me a kernel and I turned it into a commercial.
Yeah. But Bob Saget, I saw Seinfeld. I mean, I saw them all. And Ellen DeGeneres, as I said to her when I was on her show, I actually saw her at a place called the Improv in Addison. And I just love it. And I think all of that plays. That the delivery, I really believe this. The delivery is every bit as important as the words themselves.